You see, the strange thing about trying to understand the universe is that we usually begin with the assumption that it is something out there, complete in itself, running along like a great machine, with us peering in from the outside like curious passengers watching a landscape roll past the train window. And because we begin with that assumption, we end up trapped in the feeling that life is happening to us, events arriving like weather, time rushing like a river, reality standing over us like an authority. We imagine there is a world with fixed rules, and then there is me, separate from it, trying to navigate the rules, survive, improve, and earn a place in the grand scheme of things. But what if that is the first mistake? What if reality isn't something you are looking at so much as something you are participating in, something that only becomes real in the exact form you know it through the act of experiencing it, not as a sentimental idea, but as a deep, structural truth, that what you call the universe is not merely a stage of objects and events, but a relationship between information and awareness, between possibility and observation, between what can be known and the way it is known. This is the doorway into what we might call observer-indexed informational spacetime. It sounds complicated, but the core is very simple. It can be expressed in one line: E-R-O-I-G-S. And at first glance you think, that's just symbols. But symbols can be like a finger pointing to the moon. They do not contain the moon, but they show you where to look. In this formula, E stands for experience. Not abstract reality, not the world in theory, but the world as you actually know it. Sights, sounds, meanings, feelings, space, time, memory, and the sense of being here. I stands for information, the total field of possible patterns, the raw material of what could be presented. O stands for observation, the act by which something is brought into actual experience. And GS is the moving point of view, the path of perspective, the angle from which the information is being read. So the statement is this: experience arises when observation engages information through a particular perspective. Now you might say, surely reality exists whether I look at it or not. And in the ordinary practical sense, yes, you and I can agree there's a chair in the room even when no one is staring at it. But notice what you're really saying. You are speaking of a chair as a stable pattern that can be consistently experienced by observers. You are speaking of reliability inside experience. You're not speaking of an unreachable, absolute object floating outside every possibility of knowing. You're always, even when you try to deny it, speaking from within experience, inside the world of lived perception, inside the act of awareness. And that is precisely why this framework begins with a radical axiom: reality is experienced, not fundamental. In other words, what you call the world is not something you possess access to apart from experience. You never meet pure reality in a laboratory flask. You meet color, sound, texture, distance, time, emotion, thought. Even the instruments you build to measure the universe are extensions of your nervous system, translated into numbers and graphs, which then become experiences again. The universe you know is the universe appearing inside awareness. And the next axiom is even more provocative. Information is static. Now, don't misunderstand. This doesn't mean nothing happens. It doesn't mean your life is frozen or that movement is an illusion in a cheap way. It means that the complete pattern of information, the total possibility space, is not changing in the way we imagine time changing. It is more like a finished tapestry than a film still being written. It is more like a library than a single book moving page by page. So how do we get the feeling of flow? How do we get the sense of now becoming next? This is where the third axiom arrives. Observation depends on the informational manifold I and the observer's navigated perspective G. The experience you call the present is not a point floating in time like a bead on a string. It is the reading position of a perspective moving through informational structure. And that movement, OIIS, is what gives the sensation of time passing. That leads directly to the fourth axiom. Time enters only as a path parameter, not as a dimension of change. You see, we usually think time is something that exists on its own, pushing the world forward. We picture it like a conveyor belt, carrying objects and events into the future. But what if time is more like the order in which awareness touches what is already present as possibility? Not time as a thing, but time as a sequence of attention. And when you start to look at it this way, the whole drama of life shifts, because you begin to see that becoming is not the universe struggling to reach completion. Becoming is experience unfolding the already complete informational field, the way music unfolds without needing to reach the final note in order to be meaningful. Music is not about getting somewhere, it is about the dance of the melody, the tension and release, the rhythm of presence. And life, in this view, is far more like music than machinery. Now, if you really let this sink in, you begin to notice something unsettling and magnificent. The sense of being a separate self may be a perspectival effect. Like a camera angle in a film, it gives a particular view, but it is not the whole story. We assume almost without question that consciousness is divided into billions of separate observers, each one boxed inside a skull, each one looking out through two eyes, each one trapped in a private theater of experience. And from that assumption comes a great deal of anxiety, because if you believe you are a tiny island of awareness surrounded by an external universe, then of course you will feel vulnerable. You will feel like an accident. You will feel like a brief spark in an uncaring void. But what if the universe is not fundamentally divided into many observers? What if there is only one observer appearing as many? This is the idea of a universal observer, a single observing field, a single temporal consciousness presenting itself from countless viewpoints. Individuality then becomes not a final metaphysical boundary, but an index like coordinates on a map. You are a particular GES, a particular trajectory through the informational manifold, a particular angle of the same infinite seeing. In that case, the universe is not a collection of separate minds competing for reality. It is one awareness exploring itself through different windows. Now, this changes not only philosophy, but the emotional tone of existence. Because if there is one observer, then every creature is not merely another being over there. Every creature is the same being appearing through a different mask, and the conflicts of life, while real inside experience, take on an entirely different meaning. Harm is not harm to someone else, it is harm to the same observing field, fragmented into perspectives that don't remember their unity. You begin to see why compassion is not a moral rule imposed from above. It is simply intelligence waking up. It is the universe ceasing to injure itself out of confusion. And you also begin to see death differently. If consciousness is not fundamentally an isolated individual, then death is not the annihilation of the observer. It is the ending of a particular perspective, the closing of one camera angle. The character exits the scene, but the capacity to experience remains because it was never owned by the character in the first place. The I that dies is the story of being separate. The awareness in which the story appeared does not need to be destroyed because it was never a thing that could be possessed. And now the mind rebels, of course it does. It says, but then what about my life? What about my choices? What about my efforts? And that question reveals how addicted we are to the drama of separation. We think meaning must be earned through struggle in time, as if meaning were a prize waiting at the end of a race. But in observer-indexed informational space-time, meaning is not something you find hidden inside information like a secret message in a bottle. Meaning is something that arises from the way the observer engages the information. The same informational structure can be experienced as beauty or threat, as freedom or imprisonment, depending on GES, the stance, the posture, the lens of attention. This is why two people can live through the same events and inhabit entirely different worlds. One sees life as punishment, the other as play. One sees the unknown as danger, the other as possibility. The information may be the same, but experience is different because experience is not raw information. Experience is information filtered through observation and perspective. So you see, the universe is not simply a warehouse of facts. It is a relationship. It is a dance between what can appear and the manner in which it appears. Now, a common misunderstanding arises here. Someone might think this means nothing is real, or that reality is merely personal imagination. But that isn't what is being suggested at all. The informational manifold is not whatever you want it to be. It has structure, it has constraints, it has patterns that hold together. But the point is that structure alone is not experience. Structure must be presented, and the presentation is the act of observation. This is why the idea of time as a path parameter is so powerful, because it invites you to consider that the pressure you feel, this sense of being dragged from past to future, may be less like an external force and more like a mode of reading, like tracing your finger along a line of text. The story is complete on the page, but you only meet it sentence by sentence. You call that meeting time. And when you believe time is an external force, you believe you must outrun it. You must rush to achieve, to secure, to become. But when you see time as a path through information, the desperation softens. You begin to understand that life is not a desperate climb toward completion. It is the unfolding of a completeness that never needed your frantic labor to exist. You are not a broken fragment trying to earn wholeness. You are wholeness appearing as a fragment for the pleasure of perspective. And once you begin to feel this, not merely as a thought, but as something that changes your center of gravity, then the entire tone of your existence shifts. You stop acting from lack. You stop begging the world to confirm your worth. You stop negotiating with life for permission to be at peace, because peace is not a future achievement. Peace is the natural state of the observer, when it stops pretending to be separate from itself. Now imagine what this means for suffering. It does not erase suffering, but it reframes it. Suffering arises when a perspective forgets its nature as perspective. When the viewpoint believes it is the whole, when the mask believes it is the face, when the wave believes it is separate from the ocean and begins to fear the crash. But the wave was always water. The ocean was always itself. The wave is simply a shape the ocean makes for a moment, and the ocean enjoys making shapes. So too with you. You are a shape the universe is making in order to feel itself from here. You are an angle through which the infinite sees its own texture. Your life is not a test you must pass to be worthy. It is a dance the universe is doing with itself. And the reason it feels so heavy is that you keep trying to treat the dance like a march toward a finish line. But there is no finish line. There is only the movement. There is only the unfolding. And the unfolding is the meaning. Now, if we come back to the formula one last time, it becomes almost comically simple. OIIS. Experience is not a thing you possess. It is an activity. It is what happens when the universe, through observation, navigates its own informational depth from a particular point of view. So what is the you in all this? You are not the owner of experience. You are the location of experience. You are the universe's present viewpoint. And if there is one observer, then the deepest joke is that you have been trying to understand the universe as if it was something other than yourself. You have been trying to arrive somewhere, achieve some final state, become whole, become awakened, become complete, when the only thing that ever stood in the way was the belief that you were incomplete in the first place. The world you seek is not waiting at the end of time. It is waiting at the end of resistance. And when resistance drops, the universe does not suddenly become different. You simply see what was always here, that the observer and the observed were never two, that the journey was always the destination, that the meaning was always the unfolding, and that the consciousness looking out through your eyes was never merely yours. It was the whole cosmos playing at being you, And in that recognition, you are not escaping reality, you are finally meeting it.